Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to WCI's today's webinar, The Unspoken Trauma of 1971, Healing the Past for a Meaningful Future. Today, as we are celebrating 50 years of Bangladesh's victory in its war of independence, we would like to focus on an aspect of that war that is often not talked about. During the 9 months-long war, reportedly anywhere between 200,000 to 400,000 women were either raped, tortured, and killed during the attack on the villages and towns and cities, or they were held hostages during army barracks, in the army barracks, where the Pakistani army and their collaborators methodically raped and tortured these women. It has often been said that it was Pakistani army's unofficial strategy to impregnate as many Bangladeshi women as possible, because when these war children will grow up, they will be loyal to the West Pakistanis, as no true Muslim can go against their fathers. Aged from 8 years to 75 years old, some of these women were raped up to 80 times a day, until they either lost their mental faculties, died, or lived to tell the tales of the unspeakable trauma. Although when the country was liberated, no one wanted to hear about them. Instead, they were put on a pedestal called Birangana, meaning war heroines, quite like the helpless heroines of a fairy tale, and forgotten all about. Freedom fighters and their families were even enticed with stipends to either marry them or take care of them, yet very few were actually taken care of. Add to that the fact that due to the absurd notion of honor of a woman being tied to her sexual purity and the honor of her family, and for that matter, the clan being tied to the purity of their women's honor, the easiest way to demoralize people from many cultures is by hurting the honor of their women, by raping them. It is for exactly this reason rape has been used as an effective strategy of war since the beginning of history, and yet quite often has been left out of the history books for the very same reason. Along with the Pakistani army and their local collaborators, we also added the torment of these war rape survivors of Bangladesh by over and over stigmatizing them in the name of honoring their contribution to our liberation war, by mentioning to them, as we say, our mothers and sisters have lost their honors, as if honor is something so flimsy, so tangible, that some random perpetrator can destroy it by raping them, just like that. Today we talk about the unspoken horror and trauma suffered by our war rape survivors in the hands of Pakistani army and their local collaborators, Razakar, Al-Badr, and Al-Shams militias, and how the society failed these survivors in every single way. We will also talk about transgenerational trauma and the effect of that trauma, and how, if unhealed, that trauma can descend down to the future generations and have a significant effect on their lives and their interactions with other human beings. We will also explore if this unresolved phenomena can perhaps be one of the many factors behind the rape culture that is so predominant in today's Bangladeshi society. But first of all, let me introduce you to our panelists today. With us, we have Viola Rebecca, a psychoanalyst and alumni member of Women's Therapy Center Institute, NYC, with in-depth knowledge of cultural anthropology and psychology of people as a contemporary psychoanalysis within the context of their respective cultures. She is the author of Project Rape, A History of Shame. Viola is a feminist, a human rights activist, and a therapist with over 23 years of clinical experience working with trauma, PTSD, war rape survivor syndrome, and transgenerational trauma. We have Dr. Snigdha Rezwana, who is an assistant professor at the Department of Anthropology at the Jahangirnagar University in Bangladesh. Her area of interests are social anthropology, gender and sexuality, queer and non-binary gender fluidity in South Asia. Snigdha has just completed her PhD from Auckland University of Technology, New Zealand. The topic of her dissertation was Beyond Binaries, an ethnographic study of Hijra in Dhaka, Bangladesh. And of course, we have our very own Shupriti Dhar, award-winning journalist, human rights activist, and the founder of online portal womenchapter.com and the founder of WCI. So let's start with Snigdha. Snigdha, tell us a little bit about the Biranganas of Bangladesh from an anthropological perspective.
Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to talk in here. And I'm very grateful and thank you to Women Chapter International. It was really very nice meeting with my another panelist, Rebecca, Shumoapa, and Shupriti as well. It's a privilege for my side because two things I want to say at the very beginning. From my side, it's really I feel today it's honor. Why? Because I did not see what is called freedom fight. I did not meet anybody who in my family who is a part of a rape victim during that freedom fight. So I'm a generation. The topic, when you say it, the transgenerational trauma. But how do I perceive? Because it's my generation. Without having any relatives, I also bring the same values, the horror, the trauma, the trouble. So this represents me as well. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk in here. So at the very beginning, I would like to say, as an anthropologist, in Bangladesh, this is a very popular discourse, political discourse, is that around 20,000 women, 100,000 women has been a rape victim during the freedom fight. But the very first important thing which I need to pointing out, all those women has been titled by Birangona in Bangla word. It can be translated as warrior, can be translated as a warrior. But if I go to the etymological meaning of this word, unfortunately and ironically, this is something when a woman is doing her fight truly capitalized by her own body, not her own power or strength. So the biological identity of a woman is very significant to having the title Birangona. So after the freedom fight, when Bangladesh as a new country, those women get only this title. This is the one and only title that was their capital to identify them as a Birangona. And when I say that Birangona, it also, many authors raise the point why this is so important, why we could not treat them as a part of our freedom fight, why we cannot equally treat them as a freedom fighter. That was a question. But the problem is that we celebrate that their contribution to our freedom fight is really very honorable. But in practice, if you just look to the history, then we can find no one. In fact, I would like to respect, with my full honor, I like to remember Ferdowsi Priyobashini, but except her, if we just ask our new generation, do you know any name of any Birangona or any of that woman, any generation, any people? No one knows their name. No one knows their name. No one remember who are they, what is their contribution. There is another famous anthropological research has been done by Noyonika Mukherjee, where she said that, remember, this Birangana or the rape victims all are a part of shame, actually. In a other way, we give the name, we celebrate in our historical books, we sold it into the marketing of our nationalism, creating our national identity. But in practice, when we go through, we can see that these people's memory, those people who has been victimized at the time, they were continuously poked by other people in their surroundings. They were treated with mockery. They were forced by their environment. They have to hide that experience. They have to hide that that trauma. They have to coping with the trauma with their own. But on the other side of the part of our political agenda, we celebrate it. Every time, every single parliament, every member, when they start to talk, they always recite the things: we respect, we respect, we respect. But in practice, no respect has been showed. Even if you go through any sculpture in Bangladesh, there are many freedom fighter sculpture. Sculpture is not only a sculpture. Sculpture, freedom fighter sculpture, is a symbol, is a discourse. It transforms the knowledge, the history to other generation. But if you go through the sculpture, I had done this research in 2013, and I have shown that the very significant sculpture, Operajeyo Bangla, Shopardito Shadhinota, Shongshoptok, the famous sculpture. Just have a look. You will not find any of those quote unquote Birangona present in there. No Birangona. Even the participation of women was there just as like either as a nurse or someone, maybe a freedom fighter, got a bullet on his chest, and the women are seeking help from God or some nature. So that is the participation. That is the history we produce, and we sold it and we transferred it. Now the question is that what happened to those people? What happened those women who have been through that that horrific experience at that moment? And this is another significant, important aspect, that as we know, near about 5,000 women was forced to do abortion after the freedom fight. And also there's a no list. We don't know how many were baby, Juddha Shishu, has been detached from that those women. Because our nation, our national identity, our leaders thought that it will be very much harmful for us to carry those babies. But they never thought, what happened? The so-called celebrated motherhood? What happened to that mom? Because yes, of course, there is a trauma. There is a horrific experience. But who can decide a mom? The relation between a woman and her own child, it could be a part of her healing process. It could be, but we never focus on those things. We just simply disown those child, and we force that mother to disown this child, and we force them also not to tell anything. Hide the history, hide your experience, hide your even your expression, hide your expression. Like how many people, even it's a case, it's not only case of a quote unquote lower class woman or upper class woman, educated woman or uneducated woman. In that case, this traumatic experience, this social negligence, this hatred When I to take interview, or I spoke to my students and I asked them or I talked to them, I found they are not interested to know about those Birangona. They are interested to know about that freedom fighter. There's a lots of title: Bir Pratik, Bir Uttam, Bir Bikram. How many titles? There's a lots of title, but what is their contribution? And still, at the age of after 50 years, we still stand in the same position. We still celebrate those people, title them Birangona. Many of them died. I took an interview of some of them, and she said that I did not do anything for Bangladesh. I did not do anything, but I lost my whole life. I did not do anything for this country. I did not get any respect. I did not have that medal. I did not have that title. But what I have lost my own body part. I have lost my own body part. I have lost my dignity. I have lost my position, but I never get anything from this country, neither from the people. My own parent disowned me. My own family, my kin ties disowned me. And now I am a beggar in the street. That is my achievement. That is the contribution that I have been through at that moment. Whereas I was a student of Eden College at that moment. So this history is never come out, because history is very political. History is very important. Who is written the history? Whose history we read? Whose history is celebrated? Whose history is neglected? So all this political aspect should be acknowledged. In the case of women, not only the Birangona, only one freedom fighter's name can be you found, Taramon Bibi. There's only one. Is this the only case? No, it's not. And is this the only case that even I have also been through, like when Jahanara Imam make a movement in 1992, Ghatok, People's Tribunal, Gano Adalat. At that moment, couple of them who are victims, they were present over that place, just try to look at. But when they go back to their home, their village, people said, how much money do you get? How much money do you get? What you are going to sell now? So shame, anger, rage, nothing they can express. Nothing has been represented. Every single moment, our media, our political parties, our history, everybody is capitalized just this number. We just know the number, but number could not be an issue. Even how do you find that counting head? Imagine you are a rape victim and you are there, present please, I am a victim. How dehumanizing is this? But this dehumanization, very unfortunate, this dehumanization not only happened in 1971, rather still every day, every single moment, they dehumanize. I'll stop in here. Maybe I'll add more later. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Snigdha. So we heard about the anthropological perspective. Now I'll come to Shupriti. You have been a journalist and you have covered the Birangonas and you have seen the perspective. If you can share a little bit about them as a journalist, as an activist.
Thank you, Shumo, and thank you, Snigdha, because you have, you have described it very, your word was so powerful and described in a very right way. So, so I can say that as a journalist, I didn't do many stories on Birangonas. In fact, I don't want to say the word Birangona because for me it's very like humiliation maybe. towards them, and because they're freedom fighter, and I remember that a couple of years ago when I was in Bangladesh, and I met one woman. Her name was Mamutaz Begum. She was from Gazipur, it's near Dhaka city, and she came to the hospital. When she came to the hospital, I met her, and she had fistula. Maybe you know the fistula. What is fistula? Everyone knows that because of rape. And that time it was maybe 45 years of liberation, freedom, our freedom. So 45 years she was carrying the fistula with her. And when I met her in the hospital, she couldn't speak that time because she didn't have strength to say anything. And she couldn't hear well. So I had to talk through her daughter and a son. And you know that it's very tricky things that when you have your mother or someone, sister or someone was raped during the war, the whole family was like stigmatized, and so they didn't express those things. They didn't say anything about those incidents. So I saw her children. They were already adult person, but they were stigmatized to speak about her mother's things. But I tried to, you know, I went almost every day there, and I tried to talk to her, know about her feelings. But then she was died because it was her last moment. So I met her, and Snigdha was very rightly said that we know only Ferdowsi Priyobashini, and we know other Rama Chaudhuri because she wrote book on her stories. So it was she, not, we didn't discover her. She came out and told us about her story. And we don't know much about other women. So there are, you know, there are lots of stories about them, but again, we as a journalist, we did our like reporting beat. We have just covered our news story, but that time I was not an activist, so I couldn't feel their feeling, you know. If I say, if I met them now, you know, it will be another feeling for me. So first they were recognized as Birangana, and they never received the honor of recognition and for their contribution to the liberation war. And because they should have been recognized as freedom fighter from the very beginning. And not only in 2015, if I am not wrong, that we started to say them as freedom fighters of Bangladesh. But by that time, most of them were perished. They were died, and we don't know them already. And most of them, those freedom fighters, lived their lives in unimaginable poverty. So like Snigdha was saying that they had to do begging, they were beggar. And so, and then afterwards, the government decided to give them stipend, but it was another tricky thing that quite often their families came out, collect the money, and left them without, you know, tracing. And we didn't know about what happened with those money, with those freedom fighters, with those women freedom fighters. And we didn't do the follow-up reports that how they live their life, how they live their life in their surroundings with their children. And I know that some of our prominent people created some centers for those women, Biranganas, but those centers also were shut down. We don't know the why. what was the main reason for it. And they didn't have any plan B for those people, that where will go those women. And they were spotless since then. And I don't know, when I was looking for some people, I couldn't find their list, you know. So as Nikta was saying that there was 5,000 abortions, but I know that officially 25,000 abortions were performed. I don't know this is right or not, but I have found this through Google, and unofficial number was like, you know, much higher. And most of these women never received any physical or psychological support, but as Nikta already said, and from their family and their community. And so because of this patriarchal society and system, our system is very much patriarchal. So the result was a disaster. For decades, they perished, unknown and forgotten. And sometimes they were roaming the streets with altered mental state as a result of the unimaginable trauma, which we don't accept that they can have some trauma, because this is very much, you know, uncovered issue that we don't speak about that trauma. So it's very.
Thank you, Shupriti. Just to clarify that I think Susan Brown Miller was one of the first people who really covered this matter in depth in her book Against Our Will. So she has written that there were, I think it's the Planned Parenthood, an international organization that came to Bangladesh right after December 1971. And according to their data, that they officially, they performed 25,000 abortions, that according to them. So this doesn't keep into account anything that people, like anything that happened without their knowledge. And you can imagine that only people with resources to come to them were able to come to them. Like there are women in villages, women who are outside of the capital city, they had no way of getting in touch with these people. So it's the number, and even the number of war rape survivors. There are 3 official reported numbers according to Susan Brown Miller. It's 200,000 to 400,000, and then another number says 300,000. And these are the official numbers, because like in spite of so much international coverage, the issue of the war rape didn't even start coming into reports until January, if I'm not mistaken, January 1972. So there was actually quite a bit of, I don't know why nobody thought it was important enough to be covered. And the first time that historically or in the recent history that we see that war rape is being covered in terms of historical fact is, if I'm not mistaken, First World War. And since then, the independence war of Bangladesh is where one of the highest number of mass rapes were performed. And the tragedy remains that in spite of that, wartime rape is not often considered a war crime. Why? Because you don't have proof. Yes. And of course, the collaborators or the army will not commit it in the presence of witnesses. So I think it's something that we need to also think about.
And just last week I had another webinar in Bangla. We were talking about this trauma and about these things also. And one of our panelists, she was describing that she has seen that lots of women did suicide after the war was over, and then they came out, they didn't know where to go, and they came out, you know, so the number is I cannot say that it's the actual number, because there are so much unheard stories, so many, and we don't know the actual, because women were very much neglected in every time. So they didn't recognize their struggle, their fight, and they only think that you can fight with the weapons. But those women, for like Snigdha was saying, that with their dignity, with their honor, with their courage also. And we know the horrible, terrible stories about how they were raped, how they were tortured, and but how they survived. Some of them were survived, and how they survived, how they lived their life throughout the years, we don't know. And this trauma, this trauma is very, very much, I don't know how to explain this. We must have covered this trauma. We must have recognized this trauma, but we couldn't.
I'll just, in relation to sexual abuse and trauma, I think Viola will later come to this in her part of the session. But if you could just kind of compare the stigma that these war rape survivors faced and compared to the sexual violence survivors today in today's Bangladeshi society, how do you see that comparison? Is it worse for today's survivors, or is it the same? How would you compare it?
The question to me?
Yes.
I think that it's worse, of course, because that we are talking about 1971. But if we see in when we are in 2021, the society's outlook towards women and sexual abuse in Bangladesh remains same. In fact, in many ways, it has gone backwards in the past 5 decades. So back in 1971, at least there was a secular sentiment around, but now, I don't know, there still didn't intend to see women confined within the 4 walls of their home or within the wraps of hijab or burqa, or as much as we see in today's Bangladesh. And the situation, of course, the radical Islamization of the past 2 decades has brought a downward spiral in the status and quality of life for the women of Bangladesh. So everything is, is interlinked. And the rape culture and radical Islamization, and our society also become very much radical, not only Islamist, but as a whole. So women are in the same position, I think. Now we can raise our voice, we can say our things, but what happened? For example, what is happening now in Bangladesh, if we see that how they're saying, bullying us, how they're talking about women, they don't have any respect towards. And what will happen with the rape victims, survivors? It's better to say survivors. We can imagine. So I don't see there is a much difference. Maybe Snigdha can say about this after Viola's, because she's an anthropologist, and as an activist, I don't see much difference between the women in 1971 or 2021. Just we can raise our voice, but not everyone. We are sitting in the privileged place, so we can say that we can raise our voice, but who are being raped in the villages or in marginalized society, they don't have. And still we have children who are being raped. And we know about a girl, 5-year-old girl, that she was brutally raped by her father's friend. And now she has been struggling with her life. She is now teenage, 12 years, 12 or 13 years. I can't imagine this, so,
so in many ways we can see like that the media is victimizing the survivor once again, like instead of
Yes.
standing next to the survivor and asking for justice for them, it's trying to crucify them again and again and abusing them in a way.
Yeah, and they're being raped twice, thrice, when they are going for their justice, for example, if they file a case against a rapist, and they're being raped again by those advocates, lawyers, and now our girls, women are doing protest against that law, which was enacted many, many years ago, even in British period. So that we have to change those laws.
Thank you. So now I'll come to Viola. We have done, our audience is probably familiar with transgenerational trauma. But for those who has not seen our previous sessions, Viola, if you could just briefly give an introduction once again to what transgenerational trauma is and how it affects us in terms of how it affects when it comes to rape, wartime rape specifically.
And how can you relate to our war also? Because you have done your research on 1971 war rape victims. So
yes.
Thank you, Shomo. Thank you, Supriti. Thank you, Razvata, for your introduction and really interesting point of view. And this historical, social, and cultural, and of course, political context is always fascinating for me to witness this understanding, ongoing, deeper attempt to understand history of your country and also connect this to the psychological understanding of the consequences of the war, but not only, of course, war, also about previous experiences. So I cannot promise I'll be short because talking about transgenerational trauma is really, really challenging. However, I will do and I will try my best. So Vivian Rakov in 1966, she brought to the social attention her findings after working with Holocaust survivors and their experience during Second War in Canada, actually. And she described first time in human history something what we start calling transgenerational trauma. So this term is well known in scientific world and right now more like widely since then. So what does it mean? Transgenerational trauma is the response, psychological. However, recently we start using also description of physiological response to the events, overwhelming events, threatening life events, traumatic events, such as a war, genocide, rape, and other experiences, what people are going through, and those experiences changing people's lives forever, from the psychological point of view and physiological point of view. I think like we used to think like a trauma, that is a Greek word, and that's mean a wound in Greek word. And psychologists, they start using this term to describe psychological consequences of some kind of events. And since then, we are using this term, what described previously only medical perspective, also in this area of a psychological treatment. So a trauma is events what's happening in every people life probably. However, how people reacting to these difficult events is really individual. But every war, every rape during the war is the event what changing people perspective forever, psychologically and also physiologically. So the transgenerational trauma, again, this is like, I put some words. This is the psychological and physiological effects after life-changing experiences, unresolved experiences. So that's mean when we are talking right now about war in Bangladesh in 1971, we are talking not only about war activity, but we are talking about people respond to the war and other events during this war, what makes people life completely different. And when we are talking about specifically about rape, we are talking about individual experience of invasion of their body. So when people experiencing something like that, like somebody is trying to invade your body, your self of security is removed forever. So everyone, every human all over the world need to feel safe with ourselves in a society, smaller, bigger, and national level as well. When this sense of security is removed, you are experiencing from the physiological and psychological level something what we are calling fight, flight, froze response. So that's mean like your body and your mental health activity is focused to survive, only survive in some way. Fight or flight, meanings escape from the dangerous situation, or froze if that is impossible. And this is really important to know when we are trying to analyze the group of survivors of sexual violence during the war in 1971, like probably, because that's also is really important to know when we are talking about numbers, when we are talking about statistic of the sexual violence during the any war, not only in 1971, we are talking about unknown numbers. So for some time, we are receiving a lot of data after rape, what is happening in every single place all over the world. However, data after the war, rape data, doesn't exist itself. When we are trying to find out information about, for example, right now, what's going on in Ethiopia, the data of rape survivors, of survivors who are going through with this experience right now, doesn't exist. And also when you're trying to find out other data from other places, all over the places, you cannot. It's something fascinating, like the consequences, because every war is going hand to hand with rape. That's something what we already know really well, right? Like war doesn't exist without rape, unfortunately, and rape is a use, and Shumu said this today, used as a weapon of war. So when we know this, why nobody is putting enough attention and reporting this such a important event what is changing individual and group people forever, life forever. So, but what I was trying to say, like a data doesn't exist. And even when we're trying to analyze situation related to the, you can say this, maybe that's some kind of awkward description to the regular rape, what is happening in regular life, we know only about 7 to 8%, because that is the statistic of reported data, reported rape as a crime event. So that's mean like 93% of rape is not reported to the legal enforcement. When we are talking about rape during the war, data is completely unknown. So we really don't know how many people as individuals and also as family members, also as society members, is affected by this life-changing experience, such as rape during the war, and from the individual, as I said, and physiological level. So again, coming back to your question, Shomo, transgenerational trauma is individual respond to the life-threatening response, and then that is something what is affecting small group of people close to the survivor. That's mean probably family members, society, and also entire country later on. So nobody is free. Nobody is safe after the war. Something like that, like no one is affected by trauma, is impossible after any kind of war. When we are talking about trauma and war, that's probably you can use these words in the same way. When we're talking about war in 1971, entire country, entire Bangladesh were traumatized by the war and sexual violence during the war, and currently is struggling after 50 years, struggling from the consequences related to these traumatic events, trying to use what is possible, right? Like trying to deny pain, trying to name Birangona woman, but in other way, trying to shame them and remove from the society. So that is everything what you guys describe already is kind of an attempt to try to digest and try to navigate consequences of traumatic events during 1971. So transgenerational trauma is something what is really complex and need to be recognized and need to be addressed after any kind of war genocide events, because later on, a lot of generation is struggling with the consequences. Currently, as a researcher, are saying like 14 generation after the war or genocide will be struggle with the consequences of war, rape experiences. 14 generation of people were affected by this kind of events.
Thank you, Viola. So in many kind, like I know in other events you have given the example of Holocaust survivors, and you have indicated how those fight and flight response and those instincts are ingrained in the DNA. So if those kind of responses are still inside the nations or the descendants of the war trauma survivors from 1971, do you think that could be the reason of the way we today see rape or rape culture as a society?
I am sure, like that is part of the consequences. I think the first what is important, Bangladesh is a country who is struggling with long-term consequences of many kind of oppression, right? We are right now focusing on the war in 1971, but also Bangladesh has a long story of other kind of oppression. And we need to remember that, right? Like some invaders came to this country and occupied the country, trying to remove identity, trying to change identity, trying to bring some other idea, trying to make people conflicted and fighting with each other. That's also is really important when we are talking about consequences, these long-term consequences. But currently, Bangladesh is struggling. I am saying this generally, and I'm thinking mostly like about a therapeutical group, right? Like Bangladesh is my patient who is struggling with some consequences. So I will be open to say like Bangladesh is struggling with lack of language to describe traumatic events. So mostly when I'm reading some articles, when I am following some news, what I am noticing is this shaming, blaming language where the victim of sexual violence, current sexual violence or related to the war in 1971 is blamed. So instead of understand of the complexity of the traumatic events such as a rape, especially during the war, the victim is subjected to the blaming experience. And what does this mean? That is re-traumatization, right? Like someone were raped, didn't receive enough support and understanding, and later on is blamed by something, what's happened to this person without this person will. It wasn't a choice, right? So we are talking about, for example, we are talking about re-victimization from the national social level. So when I was doing my research to my book, Rape: A History of Shame, Diary of the Survivors, I find out like I cannot be effective when I am working with survivors of sexual violence only as a therapist, when I am missing the point related to the social context, cultural context, to the religion context, or even political context. Because I cannot resolve with survivors their problem related to trauma or PTSD when I am not trying to see their context. So they will feel better maybe during the session with me when I am, empathic, I am responding, I try to understand, I am naming their experience, and then they are coming back home when they are re-traumatized by the family member, or they are hearing from their neighbors, like, that's shame on you, like you are speaking up about something what we are not talking about in our society. Or this survivor of sexual violence is reading in the journal, like, that is so shameful, like some woman speaking up about their experience. They need to remember, like, they are mother of children, they are wives and daughters of parents. They need to keep quiet because that is necessary in this particular society. So the language what is used trying to resolve trauma is extremely important from individual level and also group level. And language can be really supportive and also in the same time can be used as a weapon to re-traumatize and control survivors of sexual violence. And that is something what is happening in Bangladesh in mass scale, I can say that. For sure, like a lack of access to the mental health support and lack of understanding what does it mean really to receive mental health support. I was following some data. It was really interesting, also so sad to find out, like global mental health, University of Washington conducts some research by the World Health Organization, and they find out, like in Bangladesh is much higher percentage of violence, domestic violence, than any other Asian country is right currently, and that is of course official data. So when we are talking about any kind of official data, we are talking only about part of the reality, right? The real number is probably much higher usually. So 32%, 32% reported domestic violence. That is overwhelming. And we are asking why that's happening. That is part of unresolved trauma. If people don't know how to navigate this complexity of emotion related to the previous experience, they are repressed all those feelings. They are trying to control these feelings, and they are using energy because feelings, that's energy, right? That's something what is inside us, and we need to know how to navigate, how to understand, and how to navigate these feelings when we are interacting with others. If most of our lives we repress feelings because we was observing our parents who repress their feelings, and their parents observe their grandparents, that is kind of a message how to navigate and how to understand this part of our human condition. And then this explosion, for example, as a domestic violence, is representing something what is much deeper, right? Related to something what people don't even consider, right, as a source of this current problem. Same like statistic would be brought to the attention, depression or sexual violence, current sexual violence in Bangladesh. So, and the higher rate of the addiction, that is growing number. That's, and depression, that is another one part, right? Like when we suppress and we cannot resolve our feelings, probably we will use the energy from these feelings against ourselves. That's what is happening often to women, right? Like I cannot stand up, I cannot speak up, so I will somehow psychologically attack myself, blame myself, shame myself, and that's what we call in the Western world depression. Of course, I'm saying this really general. So we can see, following information from the social media, from the newspapers, from TV, ongoing problems, not only because society is struggling with, current problems, but also because those problems are related to unresolved, related to war and other traumatic events from the past. And when the society is unable to see this bigger picture and use some tools to make connection between what is happening now with the past, with my family past, and also society past, we are struggling later on with really complex problem as a society. And that is something what is happening in Bangladesh, unfortunately.
Thank you, Willa. So before we will come back to you to get some ideas from you in terms of how we can resolve or move forward in order to heal ourselves as a nation or as a community. But before that, I want to come back to Snigdha once again. If you could just I know we can probably do an entire series if we talk about this theme, rape culture. But because of the current environment in Bangladesh, if you could just give a few, I would say, a few points, or as an anthropologist, your observations regarding it, or as a country that is 50 years old, is it where it should be? Is it's Bangladesh where it should be in terms of women's life or quality of life?
Thank you. It was really very wonderful to hear Supriti and Rebecca. It was really absolutely, I agree with the point you have made through, and that is the point I also pointing out at that moment, that during wartime or during even in the regular time, like right now today, how many rape cases has been filed in? We all know. So how many rape cases are filed in? So the data you have, it might be the 10%. It might be the 10% or maybe less than that. We never know. So when we focus on rape or talking about rape victims or counting hate, for me, it's really very, it sounds really very irrational for counting hairs in terms of rape victim, because when I'm trying to counting hairs, behind in my mind, I'm trying to counting, it's a form of dominance, it's a form of power, and it's a form of self-surveillance, how many women I can dominate. So if you're going to ask me, see, 50 years ago, when any rape has a very different school for discussing rape, like evolutionist school, psychoanalytical school, postmodern school. So there's a many different school. So when I'm going through if I start to going through, talk about from evolutionist school, being as an anthropologist, I just try to look at it that once upon a time when there's a land scarcity, we're fighting for land. So one clan and another clan, they attacked the women and they raped them in that sense, because they want to explore their kin ties, their blood formation, make new family members in their clan. So from that evolutionary school, you can see that attacking a clan, holding their land, and for their power and dominance, they are doing as a part of a culture. So from the very beginning of understanding of rape school, it is really very important. Rape is not at all is a relate with some form of sexuality, some form of your what actor you are, you are very much seductive. This is all our patriarchal discourse which try to derail your focus, because we are entrapped within the patriarchal discourse. It always produces new tools in front of us, new narratives in front of us, so that we can keep ourselves busy instead of looking through what is happening on there. So the political connotation of rape is very much important. Rape is a violence, and rape is always a political violence. Rape is, and rape was, and rape will be always a political violence. So the violence.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I would like to add, the rape is a manifestation of power and control. That's what, and this is universal everywhere.
Thank you so much. Yes, exactly. It's power, and of course, and the major focus is that when we see, even not only that, when we see the capitalism, you can see it's a very significant connection. Capitalism, they need a class, working class or dominant class, and somebody will be in the control, holding the control, and somebody will just dominate you, control you. So at the same time, patriarchy do the same thing, and rape is a weapon. Rape is a weapon, and women body parts has been treated always like a weapon of the to show how I very much, what should I say, vividly show my power practice. Is a naked power practice in other sense, because there's a different form of power practice in Bangladesh. So 50 years back, if we just, I'm going through this Shumapa's question, 50 years back, Shumapa, when that time, during the freedom fight, as I said, that each and every class, the trauma, the horrific experience, different. For example, when I work in the Hijra community, I went to, I can still remember one day I met a sex worker girl. She was telling me that her mother was a rape victim. Her mother was a rape victim, and when she was during 1971, and when she was a rape victim, she doesn't have anybody to any places to go. And when she doesn't have any places to go, she has to survive. And because of the survival strategy, she took a option for doing sex work. So she was asking me that it was really very shameful. She was saying that, Appa, don't tell it anybody. I have a shameful story. Imagine her mother was a rape victim, 1971, turned into a sex worker. Now another generation, she is a sex worker. She is telling lots of stories to me, sharing, and she said, Appa, I have a secret. I have a very hidden secret story. Please don't share it to anybody. I was thinking maybe some other stuff, but when I heard, she was saying that my mom, my mother, my grandfather was a school teacher, and my grandfather has been killed, and my mom has been taken to the military concentration camp, and over there she has been tortured. She said she was explaining very, I cannot explain this. I'm so sorry that this is really very difficult to explain, and I don't want to explain it. But whatever, she said that she have heard that stories from her mom. She said that every day I saw my mom has been she was sleeping with more than five men. But every single night, my mom was crying. I was really horrified, and I asked, this is your ruti. You always did it. So what is the difference between that concentration camp and this thing? What is the difference? Then her mom said, the difference is that I do it because this is my ruti. But that time I had dream. I was studying, I was going to school. My father was a school teacher. I never imagined that I will be in this dream. I will live in this life. So that is a story, the the story we made, I said. So 1971, that was the time anybody can come forward, move forward. So that is the historical mistake we have did, Shumapa. If 1971 can confidently say that, yes, we are the survivor. Yes, they are the freedom fighter. They are equally participate in the freedom fight. This is nothing about shame. This is nothing about women's body part, the dignity, the man shamman, the lojja, manijjot is not a part of our body part. At that time, if it could be fixed, today we will be in a different situation. The thing is that 1971, our leaders, our so-called quote-unquote progressive minded people, they were all focusing on the number, focusing on the writing national history, focusing on the patriarchal political history, which is very important. Because if you see the leaders, just tell me tell me one single name, a freedom fighter woman leader in Bangladesh. Just give me one single name. Yes, we portrayed the same discourse that we have always portrayed as a mom, mother, sacrifice. Whereas women were rape victims, women are losing their husbands. Just like, imagine there's a black feminist movement. It's a very strong movement, isn't it, in a feminist school? So their husband has been taken. So his story has been celebrated, and they have struggled, they made something. But we did not make it at that time, 1971. Many of their husband has been died, isn't it? But they did not come forward. They did not save, and they did not even appreciate it. They did not take that position at that moment. So the politics of number is really very, very much problematic. Even today, right now in Bangladesh, what do we say? Just today, I had another webinar early in the morning regarding human rights, gender difference issues and something. I said, like, imagine in Bangladesh, if you see the prime minister is a woman, opposite prime minister is a woman, garment sector, the 70% garments worker are women. This number is not represent that they are empowered. This number is nothing, this number. So rather, you can see lots of mobility. For visual media, for social media, you might have some opportunity to know. But before that, 10 years ago, you and me, we didn't know even what happened, because in that moment, some people maybe come forward and write something. Okay, something happened to me, and other people are joining them. So that is a positive thing. But at the same time, what I'm trying to say, Shumapa, history could be different if that time history would be fixed. So I am not expecting this time should be very good. Rather, what I'm telling, you did something very wrong in your past, and you are carrying this. That is called transgenerational trauma or mistake. What should I? This we are carrying it. That is my understanding.
Thank you so much for saying that out. And that is why we can see that even out there, out in the open, You can see some government official, elected official, can get away with saying publicly that they can openly threaten a civilian to rape them, or like, sodomize them, and threaten them that, okay, come see me, meet me right now, or I'm gonna get the, like, police and whatever to pick you up and kidnap you, and they can get away with that and leave the country unscathed.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the result of that 50-year-long mistake.
Yeah. So we are celebrating 50 years of victory.
50 years of patriarchal.
Shame for us.
50 years of mistake.
50 years of mistake.
50 years of, I don't know, irony upon irony, and I don't know. So let's
I can just add one thing, that I'm also I have a depressing character. Viola already knows, everyone knows who are close to me. And as Bangladesh is a big passion for her, so she knows that we are going through such depression, through trauma and everything. And I remember that when I was in Bangladesh, I went to psychiatrist, and my story started from 71. I didn't know for a long time that my depression and my trauma and everything goes with 71, because when I lost my father, so I was very small baby that time, but my trauma started from there. So I can imagine that how trauma affects us, and what we are seeing now after 50 years of our independence is the same thing. I can connect it with myself. Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Didi, for sharing that. Yes, it's one of those heritage, and I don't think even that we could do justice to people like your father by also carrying the burden of our mistakes. We didn't do justice to people like your father. We didn't do justice to women like Ferdowsi Priyobhashini. We made a first of our independence in the past 50 years. So now let's move into some positive ideas. I mean, we know the mistakes we made, but we have to kind of, before it's even more late, we have to find a way to get back to the right track. We have to, as a society, as a community, we have to find ways to heal ourselves. So let's find some ideas from Viola, if you can end our session today with those ideas. And with that,
Thank
Viola,
you,
I'll give it
for your trust. I don't think so. Like I can find magical resolution. I would love to. However, that's probably impossible. But I want to say one thing really clearly. You guys don't see how much is already done in the good direction. I am a stranger. I am a witness. I am seeing what is happening in Bangladesh from some perspective, because I wasn't born in this country, and I am only interacting with you. I am following stories, I'm reading, and I am doing my research. But I want to say really clearly, like even with all those mistakes, misconception, with this changing context, the fact like a Bangladesh, first time in the history, brought to the attention a Birangana woman as not victims of shame from the beginning, right? Later on, we know like that's changed and other things happen. But from the beginning, idea was really beautiful. That is so meaningful. And also that is the background, what is inspire other country. We went with Supriti recently to Kosovo. And we was able to meet with survivors of sexual violence during the war in Yugoslavia, especially in Kosovo, 1999, and talk about sexual violence during this war, specifically in Kosovo. So they are inspired by the Bangladesh Birangona woman, and they start calling their survivors of sexual violence heroine because of this inspiration, what is coming from the Bangladesh. So what I am trying to say, we need to remember, like, of course, a lot of mistakes happen, a lot of, problems the current Bangladesh is struggling with, but also we did a lot already. And that need to be continue by the way where the survivors of sexual violence, they will be recognized as a hero of war, a fighter of war, not as a shame of the war or secret of the war. And how to do it. I would like to say what is the major part of this work is probably education, seminary like that, articles in the journals, interview with the reporters, following information when anybody trying to shame or blame victims of sexual violence in response to it, changing understanding in a society of how to raise boys and girls and educate them about meanings of sexuality and also about violence and trauma. All of those things is really important to rebuild social perception and understanding in the long term of the consequences of sexual violence during the war, but also during just regular life. That's what I think. I don't even think right now about, this government need to rebuild a medical system, need to bring to the attention, psychologists or social worker, because that's probably currently is impossible. But this part, this educational part is already something what is happening, because a lot of people trying to bring this understanding to, the wider society, and that need to be continued. And you also need to be proud what you already done, not only for your country, but for the other people who are following what you did in 1971.
Thank you so much, Viola. That really meant a lot. That compliment means so much, really. And I know you have really followed Bangladesh and our war rape survivors very closely. Today, we meant to have with us Lisa Ghazi, who also did a lot of research and has made a documentary. And also, one of our war rape survivors, Ferdowsi Priyobhashini. She passed away recently, but her daughter and her two granddaughters has agreed to speak with us, but unfortunately they couldn't be here today due to a family emergency. But we promise that we will be bringing them all together in front of you one day very soon. So keep joining us and keep inspiring us. And thank you, Snigdha, and thank you, Viola and Shupritidi, for all your support. You guys have been so amazing. Thank you so much. And of course, our audience, thank you. And until the next time, take good care. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.